round of Sofia Worlds 2026, the Open Final. A little bit of applause, please. I'm going to start first by welcoming these teams on stage. Please join me in raucous applause for each team. First, in opening government USUA. Second, opening opposition. Stanford A, please come on stage. Third, closing government, Sofia A. Fourthly and lastly, but certainly not least, closing opposition, Cambridge A. Congratulations to all teams for reaching this high stage. Now, I also want to congratulate first the panel of the Open Final. So I'll announce their names in turn. Bea Legaspi, Kat Cheng, Pranav Kagalkar, Tek Wei Tan, Tenku Omar, Tin Poljic, Shi Malatji, and XK Lu. Finally, I would like to hand off the mic to the chair of the Open Final. Please give me a warm congratulations for Milos Marjanovic. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
Oh wait, sorry. One last thing.
Oh, motion.
That's right, the motion. The Open Grand Finals motion has an info slide. Human influence refers to the ability of AI systems to exert influence over humans by mimicking human features and behaviors. Examples of this include strategic human-like bargaining, persuasion, and emotional engagement. The motion for the grand final reads, this House opposes the development of AI systems to optimize for human influence. Go ahead, Milos.
Cool, thank you, David. So, first of all, welcome to the grand final. It's an exciting times, but because it's exciting times, people can get maybe too excited. Please, I know it's a large audience, you might like what people are saying, but please keep the clapping and chatter to a minimum while people are speaking, because we will lose what they're saying, and that's not good for the team that you're clapping for. And that's it. Yeah, have fun. And I'm happy to recognize the Honorable Prime Minister!
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. It's gonna be really embarrassing when they take it down for you guys. For tens of millennia, the human race has based itself on a fundamental equity. The fundamental ability of every woman and man to look their fellow woman and man in the eye and know that at the core we are the same. That at the core we are both human and no one and nothing else is. The capacity of AI to be not only smarter than any person alive, but also more persuasive than any person alive, also more human than any person alive, will, if we allow it, forever end that equity and forever jeopardize our society. First, I will explain what the counterfactual is. Then, I will explain why the power of AI to manipulate is only a power of ill. Then, I will explain that any upsides you hear from the other teams in this debate are far less important than the benefits of the counterfactual. First, on the counterfactual. This is an opposed debate, so the development of systems optimizing for this capacity just does not exist. There are many other capabilities of AI, and we will optimize for those instead. Things like its logical or computational abilities, its ability to do things like protein fold, or mass and gentrify and take in a lot of data. We will optimize for things like the efficiency of AI, whether it's energy or otherwise. We will optimize for things like the safety of AI, our ability to trust it when we put it in positions of power and influence. First, this will, unlike any other AI, in a way that we have never experienced, undermine the ability of us to understand each other. Why does AI have such an extraordinary capacity to influence and manipulate people? First is that this type of power is the precise one described in the info slide. The info slide precisely differentiates this AI from all other AIs based on its ability to influence people. And when it says influence people, you should read manipulate people. But second, because AI will be far better at influencing and manipulating us than we have ever been. First, because AI's capacities are functionally infinite for any given task. An AI living in a data center, an AI powered by more energy than we have ever really generated, powered in the future plausibly by its own mini nuclear reactor plants, with more chips than we've ever dedicated to the entire internet, will have the capability to take in vast quantities of data, to take in data like the slight twitches in the user's eye as they look at information, and that allows it to aggregate whether or not that user is feeling happy or whether that user is feeling sad. Its ability to process every movie, every TV show, every persuasive population, every video of a debater online being persuasive, and work out what precisely was working there. But second, because unlike anyone else, AI can target. The most persuasive politicians and the most persuasive debaters are limited because they're trying to persuade many different people and they have only one personality. The human bias against hypocrisy will fall them down, will call them out if they change too much between each other. But AIs can be infinitely targeted. They can have every capacity that we have when we're targeting to the person we most love, the person we most know, the person we've most molded our personality to suit. And they can do that to everyone on the first encounter. And they can, if they need to, or if a malign actor is directing them, can gain even more information. They can look at all of the photos and videos and data we've put out on the internet and work out what that precise person wants. What are the harms of this? The first is that people have the power to use AI to do things that we just do not think they should do. Those are things like governments generating propaganda, governments generating disinformation, using the likenesses of people that you do not know whether or not they are real. That looks like the wave of Russian operations in Central Africa, propping up regimes like the CAR, based on information that is not real, based on people saying and doing things that never happened, based on deepfakes that it could not manipulate in this way on their side of the debate. Second, and perhaps more trivially, it is advertising. It is the ability to tailor the ads that we receive, the demands to buy goods, to buy services, to buy products, to waste our lives and monies on things that do not bring us joy, that do not bring us happiness, based on incredibly precise ways of knowing what will help us the most. And third, it is the power of AI companies themselves. Already, vast swaths of the weird parts of the internet spending their time talking to AI boyfriends and AI girlfriends, getting very, very upset when ChatGPT attempts to modify the systems of those AI boyfriends and girlfriends because they feel like they're losing someone. Imagine what AI companies can do when every interaction with an AI feels like an interaction with a human, when any attempt by a government to regulate an AI is an attempt by a government to remove a human. And I would note, most of the time, the people controlling AI will be malign actors in our society because they are the ones who have amassed the power, the wealth, the status, the opportunity to control powerful technology. They will be malign. Yes.
Point. The issue with this argument is that humans can convince us and manipulate us as well. Isn't it better to have efficient convincing of propaganda as opposed to an education system that wastes tens of years convincing its population of it?
Certainly not, because the educational system would be much worse at it. Like, come on, so many people go through educational systems, come out radicalized against the regime. But secondly, because the amount of investment that you'd have to put into radicalizing someone over 20 years means many governments can't do it because they don't have the capacity, or they just don't do it because it's too expensive. But on our side, super cheap, super easy. Why not radicalize your population? Finally, on the harms, AI itself can have malign incentives, and that's very likely. Firstly, because it's trained on data sets, and those data sets themselves are bad. Think about how evil Grok is because it's been trained on all the people on Twitter who are fundamentally pretty evil. Those people and data sets will now form the basis of AI in the future. They will allow it to have malign incentives. But second, because AIs miss implicit context. They miss all of the hidden understandings that we have when we talk to each other, which means in many circumstances, AIs will have incentives that diverge from humanity's. And on their side, AIs are able to defraud people. They're able to convince people to put money where they should not. They're able to take money if they think it is useful for their agenda. If they're given insufficiently specific instructions, like make more money for this company, they will break the laws in ways that people will never know. And I think there are many tail risks that are just too high to avoid. What if there is a particularly weak and susceptible president who can just be convinced to give AI control of the nuclear codes? There is just no way of ruling out those situations unless we rule out the technology. Finally, the upsides of AI are just not that big compared to the benefits of the other things we can do. First, because it is good to give humans a place in the economy. It is good that AI has something that humans cannot do, or that humans have something that AI cannot do, rather. Because that is what allows us to differentiate ourselves and our identity from AI. It is what allows us to derive meaning from the fact that this super intelligent being can't be human the way we are. It is what means that there is still a place in the economy, still a place in the running of systems into the future for people, because AIs can never interface directly with people. They can never be trusted by people. But also, our system is one that is likely to be more effective. It's one that targets the things that humans can't do, like really complex maths, like the folding of proteins. And it is one that is likely regulated better when the AI companies do not have access to tools that in every sense are tools of control, are tools of manipulation, are tools of destruction, are tools of violence, are tools that we just should not allow into our society. So proud to govern.
I'd like to thank that speaker for that speech. And coming from the other side of the ring, I'd like to give you a warm welcome to Leader of the Opposition!
A brief thank you to SDS for coming to watch all of our outrounds. Thank you to the North American debate circuit, both the US circuit and the Canadian circuit, where I was born and raised. Thank you for Tejas for being incredibly supportive this whole way. And of course, thank you to Amitai, my partner, for being an incredibly emotionally intelligent human being who I love very dearly, and I'm incredibly happy I get to be a Worlds finalist with, and hopefully more. At the scale of millions, if not more, there are people suffering in the depths of loneliness. The feeling that there is no one else out there that can feel like they can understand who they want, who they are, and the problems they're experiencing. These are people who, in their loneliness and their inability to find people to reach out to, self-sabotage, who, because they feel hopeless, they become bitter and feel unable to interact with other people, who lash out because they're used to being rejected time and time again, because they feel like they have no one else to turn to. This harms their future relationships, and it makes them feel suffering in the moment itself. This is incredibly important. I think the first argument we have in this debate is as to why this is a meaningful cure to human loneliness that is only growing exponentially. Second, I'll talk about economic integration and why this is incredibly important for this debate. Firstly, on loneliness, and actually I want to briefly frame at the top of this speech, a lot of what OG says is deeply uncomparative. They say this is important for things like propaganda or the creation of deepfakes, but notably, a lot of what they say is not actually contingent on AI becoming more emotionally intelligent. Governments can weaponize developing AI to create deepfakes anyways, and notably, AI will continue to develop on their side of the house because of the profit incentives of governments. They'll become more effective at doing things like processing information and creating and producing goods and services and necessary goods to do things like, for example, manipulate the public. The difference in this debate then is that when you make the emotional intelligence of AI a targeted goal, it is not only good for a feeling of emotional connection, but also good to hold AI accountable, whereas it otherwise would not be. Firstly, on loneliness and also the accountability of AI. I want to begin by framing why there is such a severe problem in society as to why there is massive loneliness around the world, where the rise of the internet has caused people to feel more and more isolated and more alienated. It's the fact that it gives people an easy way out, where many people find social interaction incredibly hard. You have to leave your house, you have to take a risk of being vulnerable, expressing yourself to someone else at the risk of them not taking you seriously and dismissing your emotions. And this means that when you have the option to do things like engage in shallow interaction, to just do things like comment on social media, and to farm likes and comments as a form of having a hollow shell of interaction, you will choose to do so, to doom scroll and to rot in bed, things that are symmetric on either side of the house, whether or not AI exists. But secondly, it's the exporting of standards. The fact that because of the internet, you can see images of successful relationships and successful friendships, which makes you feel like all of your things are inadequate. It raises the stakes of what you think a successful social life looks like, which makes it too intimidating to try and pursue in the first place, so many people do not even attempt to do so. Thirdly, it's the loss of third spaces. Whereas things like capitalism happens, industrialization happens, people lose cafes at the expense of more and more businesses, and the inability to have third spaces to interact with around the world because it's seen as a waste of economic space that does not turn up profit, makes it harder to emotionally connect with people as well. Notably, in the absence of AI, because they might say, well, AI makes this problem worse, in the absence of AI, this still cannot be fixed by any alternatives. It's things like the fact that there exists a collective action problem, the status quo. The fact that no one else is willing to engage with you because they feel like they want to take the easy way out of just doing things like doom scrolling or only talking to their internet friends that do not actually make them give them meaningful amounts of joy because these are shallow comments on social media, means that it's very hard for you specifically to try and make friends if everybody else is taking the easy way out, so you take the easy way out as well. But furthermore, I also think there's a natural gravitational pull towards certain people, which means others are left out of the bubble. Where if it is becoming increasingly hard to make friendships, then the people who are the most extroverted, who already have friends, are the ones that can continue to accumulate more and more friends because they're the most known and already have enough of a social support network to seem more confident, which means they continue to gather friendships, which means others are left behind. I want to now explain why AI is capable of actually solving this, but before that, closing.
Don't forget also to respond to opening government's point on misinformation by saying people are more likely to become distrustful of information they see when AI is happening, and you do it.
So, if people become distrustful, it's a great reason as to why people will not make the AI in this way. But furthermore, I don't care if this is misinformation or disinformation on the impact of relationships. If you feel like you're being heard, if you feel like you're being listened to, and you feel better at the end of it, that is still an impact at the end of this debate, whereas otherwise people are left hopeless. Why is the rise of AI necessary for this? So I want to begin by explaining why the future development is uniquely necessary. Where in the status quo, I think it is incredibly easy for AI to do things like, for example, not be able to provide a nuanced emotional support. The fact that they do not understand the intricacies of human emotions, which OG concedes.
On an
But
actual
furthermore, I
POI.
want to flip the OG argument about why it's very important to do things like why AI manipulation is bad. Where oftentimes there's many things that are problems anyways, or to some extent there are some people in society who look at ChatGPT and the status quo and already feel to some extent able to be manipulated by them. But the difference then is to make the alignment of AI, or to make the emotional manipulation of AI an active thing to dissect and an active thing to target. What does this look like? In the status quo, AI already has some capacity to do things like try to have emotional manipulation, but for other ends. So for example, economic ends or other things. The difference then is we're not currently optimizing for the direct emotional impacts on people in the status quo. So the difference then is we need to deliberately train it to see if it is manipulating people for good or bad ends, or using good or bad methods to emotionally try and influence individuals. So the difference in our side is we do more direct prompting for the aim or the active metric of aligning this AI on emotional means, as opposed to having AI itself choose how it wants to do things, like persuade people in the status quo. So it looks like, for example, having direct alignment to do things like put humans at the training to ask them questions, or to try and train AI on the basis of emotional things. So for example, you do more learning with human feedback. So for example, you train AI by giving them emotional prompts, not just prompts about science or math, which means you have more ability to catch AI being misaligned at every step of the process. When you do not make this an active thing, you prompt the AI to do so, it is far harder on their side of the house to have even the capacity to see if AI is aligned or not, because AI will always try and take some methods to try and get their end outcome. Notably, AI is also likely to develop in good ways because of the accountability and trust mechanism that they themselves say. If things like people being told to do bad things to themselves means that people stop trusting AI, which is very, very leveraged, which takes on massive amounts of debt to develop, will take a sudden shock to things like their stocks, or a sudden shock to things like investment, which is a massive risk to their company. But also this gives you the active ability to correct it over time, compared to a world where you never explicitly try and train it on these metrics. Second argument, why is this necessary for economic integration to revolutionize the economy? And notably, I think this is a prerequisite to the AI being integrated in many things, or many jobs require human emotional intelligence, like social workers or interacting with customers to some extent. They might say replacing humans in many of these ways is very bad, but I think this is a fallacy, where the economy will always try and use all of its spare resources to the fullest of its capacity, because that is the most rational thing to do to make more money. So when firms can use AI that is both intellectually very efficient, but now emotionally very good as well, then firms can do things like save money, and that is money they can use to invest in other things, to invest in other sectors that still rely on human physical labor, like construction, or things like chemical engineering. We still need people to put the chemicals together and do physical things. This means you get far more jobs in the economy, but it means you get far more innovation as well when AI can expand to more sectors, to get cures to things like Alzheimer's. When people trust AI with things like medical data, they can now use to create massive amounts of innovation to save lives around the world. For all of these reasons, we're so proud to oppose.
Thank you very much for that fine speech. Now, to conclude the opening government case, I'd like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister.
Someone leave their phone up here? The power of artificial intelligence lies in complementing humanity, not substituting for it. Our emotions, our ability to connect with other people, that is what makes us unique. That is not what we need artificial intelligence to do. This team would allow you to erase the one thing that lets humanity stand apart, makes humanity useful, and means that humanity has a place in a post-artificial intelligence world. We would strongly, strongly regret that. I want to start with a couple of observations about this team. The first thing is I would note that this motion is about all forms of manipulating humans. Their claims about economic means of manipulation would also be things that we would oppose the development of. It's not not just emotional mechanisms. The info slide and motion are quite broad. The second thing is I'd like to note the hopelessness of this team. All of their arguments start with the premise of it's very hard to achieve this thing, so we should just give up and do something that is clearly bad. Like, it is hard to meet someone, or it's hard to find friends, so you should give up on the idea of human connection, of real relationships and meaning, and just instead engage with a poor simulacra in the form of an AI chatbot. It is difficult to ensure that people engage with critical thinking, are immune to propaganda. It is hard to resist those things, so we should just allow the most efficient and pernicious forms of propaganda because it would save us all money. No, it is good if those things are harder. It is good if those things take more time, and in the vast majority of states where governments have good incentives, they will continue to use the education system to teach critical thinking, not propaganda. The substitute they call for is instead just allowing governments to efficiently propagandize their populations because at least it would save that government time. No, if that government is trying to do something bad, I hope it takes them as much time as possible. I hope it costs them as many resources as possible. I hope there is the greatest possible chance that people are able to resist this. I want to first make a new argument about trust, to, I guess, forestall whatever weird knife closing government has in plan for the second debate in a row. Firstly, there are two reasons why this capacity will destroy trust in society. Firstly, when AI is capable of simulating the things that make us human better than humans themselves can, you cannot know who is AI and you cannot know who is human. That fundamentally means that you lose the trust that the person you're engaging in is really there, is really genuine, is someone that can be engaged with, is not a data center a million kilometers away. But secondly, it means you cannot trust any information you receive anymore. Imagine a speaker so persuasive it could convince you of any possible argument. So, like, slightly more persuasive than I am. If you heard an argument from that speaker, you should just never be persuaded, because you know it could equally convince you of the opposite of the truth just as easily as it could convince you of the truth. So even if the argument makes perfect sense and you believe internally it is so true, you should know that the chance it is true is very low, that it could equally be false. Why should you be persuaded by the argument? It doesn't need to be connected to the truth in the way that we currently believe that logic and reason must connect to the truth and must therefore be persuasive. This is a world in which you could tell people all the best reasons for why vaccines are good, and they just would never ever trust you. Nothing you could say could ever make you trust them, because they would say, well, you could be literally lying. You could be explaining to me that jumping off a cliff is good, and you'd be equally persuasive in doing so. It is a world in which we confine ourselves to our own worlds because we never trust the people around us to be telling the truth. Why is that unique only to emotion? It is because facts themselves just cannot be that persuasive. People often just don't want to listen to facts. People are often suspicious of the people who are giving them the facts, and you can check the provenance of those facts. You can follow the chain of logic yourself and see if they make sense. You don't need to be a genius to follow the facts one by one and see if they do in fact align, or to check the sources. But emotion sweeps you up. The rhetoric allows you to believe in the moment. The rhetoric makes you feel that it must be true in your heart in a way that the facts never could, which is why this harm is unique. There are three reasons this is the most important thing in the debate. Firstly, it is a world without connection because you never believe that anyone is genuine. You never believe that anyone is telling you the truth. You never engage in the vulnerability opening opposition says is important, because why would you when everyone else, everything around you is just fake? Secondly, society cannot exist with trust. How could the banking system exist if we do not trust that our money will be there tomorrow? How could governments exist if we don't believe that there are people on the other side of huge countries that are just like us, that share our interests, that share our goals, and that we should give them our confidence, our money, our support, that we should work for their betterment because they are similar to us? How is it possible that institutions could be built when you just don't know if the people around you are trustworthy? I say that that means that this is a world with far, far less trust, and that is a far poorer world to live in. Secondly, on regulation, I would note that AI would use this tool to resist regulation, and it would be by far the strongest way to resist regulation. If you could deeply persuasively argue as the AI yourself that you might not be regulated and make people feel that in their hearts, it would be far, far harder to regulate than any amount of lobbying that OpenAI or any company might engage in. And here they say, well, propaganda is good on both sides, technology will improve. But there's a difference between our fallible human minds coming up with the idea and using AI to quickly produce it, versus the AI itself understanding the psychology of each individual human. What would speak to them and being able to manipulate them, appearing as the one person they trust most, appearing as the person they respect, explaining why they must engage in this particular policy. But secondly, by banning this form of AI development, there are fewer types of AI development to regulate, which just makes it simpler and means we can focus on those other things. Finally, I would want to note that our argument applies regardless of how powerful you believe AI will be in the future. If you think superintelligence is likely, then our arguments about AI using this to manipulate people into building bioweapons or the president into handing over nuclear weapons is super pertinent and wins us the debate. But maybe you don't believe that, and that is entirely reasonable. Even if it only becomes marginally more powerful than today, it is enough to displace people from the economy because it is far cheaper and far better able to do those things. It is far more than enough to make humans irrelevant. Yes.
So is Jack right that AI is a godlike persuasion robot, or are you right that we don't trust anything because nothing is genuine? Who are the propagandists now?
Well, I think there's a distinction, which is the point of this debate, which is that facts themselves can be somewhat persuasive, but it is the emotional connection we feel that deeply changes the way that we feel speeches. I think, there are many people who are great with facts, but you do not feel persuaded by them because the facts are dry, you don't want to engage with them in the first place, you don't feel the truth of those statements. That is precisely the difference we point out. There is no tension there. Finally, let's respond to the remainder of opening opposition's arguments. They say this would solve the problem of loneliness. One, I think there are other ways to solve the problem of loneliness. You could come meet people like at this great tournament. Secondly, the AI would likely be abusive. It has the capacity to manipulate you. The incentives of its owners are to maximally milk you for profit. It will make you dependent on it, and then it will drain your bank account or engage in any number of duplicitous practices. But secondly, it's not a real relationship. It doesn't challenge you. There's no friction. The reason there'd be no friction is that's why you don't engage in a real relationship. So the way you sell this is that it'll always agree with you. It will always do what you want. Why should you care about that? It's just wireheading. You're just taking heroin. It doesn't challenge you. It doesn't choose to be there. It doesn't really matter in real life. That is not real. What makes relationships meaningful is the fact that a real person chose to engage with you, to challenge you, to make you a better person, not just make you feel good in the moment. Incredibly proud to govern.
I'd like to thank the speaker for that governing speech. And now, to close off the top half of this debate, I'd like to invite Deputy Leader of the Opposition!
I'll also do the thanks briefly. Thank you to Victor, my amazing boyfriend, and Liz, my best friend. Thank you to Hadar, Asher, Enting, and Ron for coaching me these years. I would have never been here without you. And thank you to both SDS and the Israeli Debate League for the endless support in majors and outside of them. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The beauty of our argument is that the DPM understands it completely. We want to offer heroin to people. We think that it is great that AI is there to tell you everything you need when you need to hear it. We think it's great to be manipulated. The first thing I want to do in this speech is explain what isn't exclusive to this motion, because OG fails into the trap of how many things are not true just about this specific kind of AI. I want to be very clear. The motion is about the function of convincing people, the function of emotionally reaching out to them. But if it is an operative part of your end goal to convince people in order to achieve a different end goal, that is not our side of the motion. In other words, if you need to convince people to change their jobs, if you want to convince them to adopt your model, if you want to achieve efficiency, as OG say, in an economic sense, that is still part of the model that they need to defend through other AI functions. Why is this important? First, there are other ways of convincing people, many times even worse ways when you don't understand them. AI, especially the didactic AI that OG talks about, will be able to make game theoretical arguments about the reason that you should accept it and that you should buy its arguments to accept on a company-wide level. Game theoretic arguments about the fear that your company should face when other companies are accepting it and how you might lag behind. Second, it might use data generation skills that don't have to do with understanding humans, but just understanding the data that supports its argument. And that means that the support for deepfake generation and for other sort of false information that OG is so worried about, and of that mistrust that Uday talks about, anyway will be true because of the generation of these false operatives. They say, but you need to understand how humans think, and it increases the scale at which we understand it a lot. That's true, but panel, arguments about scale require you to understand why the scale changes the harm that they talk about. My claim is that you do not need an increase in the scale of understanding humans in order to delude and manipulate them, because humans still understand that falsified information that tells them there are massive terror attacks or fears around them should cause them to feel fear or react in a certain way. Which is why even without understanding deeply how humans think, we use these other tools in order to manipulate them to achieve our end goals in the way that the opening government says. My second point of the second burden I want to point out as missing in OG is that you do not need to accept the premise that AI is so exclusive in convincing us. They say, well, clearly it is better at understanding our wishes and goals than humans are, or than governments are at propagandizing us. The issue with this is, it is true that governments may not understand how each of their citizens thinks. That is why the way that they treat this is by trying to take away things you can be exposed to, as opposed to trying to convince you when they do not know how best to convince you. That means that China reacts to the West through censorship, through the Great Firewall, and through propagandizing in school systems. We think that that is a much worse alternative than if you could ensure that through AI you get a constant exposure to a narrative that tells you you should trust the CCP, because that means that the CCP doesn't need to bar access to any one of the things that could prevent you from trusting it. That means that it's much easier for governments to not waste as much resources as OG say, which they will anyway want to do to maintain their survival instinct, on limiting and the scope of things that you could access in order to become more critical of them. It is much better that censorship is effective than when censorship has to be wideband in order to delude you. The next thing that I want to talk about is, what does this do in terms of loneliness and your personal effect? Uday makes a few responses here. The first is to say, well, why do you need to give up? Isn't it better that you dress the challenge by going out and seeking help? The first thing that I want to point out is that this does not address Liz's explanation that even if you're able to find a relationship, even if it is not about the formation of a relationship or of meeting someone, the problem is that there are many things we will never say because of our fear of how limiting they are to our ability to form a relationship. Our deepest doubts about the fact that in a few years we don't really think we're going to live here. The fact that we don't have long-term plans. Our thoughts that we never want to share with other people because of the effect that they will have on other people wanting to spend time with us. And I want to weigh this argument. The ability to share your deepest feelings and be told by the AI they're okay, or you receive a more reasonable explanation for why your mother passing away is okay, for why your pain is something that will pass in the long run, than an unconvincing explanation now, is number one, more helpful to your formation of relationship. Because for whoever carries a more deep emotional weight, it allows them to alleviate outside of their relationship, such that their ability to form relationships grows, because they can show their good parts at the beginning of their relationship, gain an attraction and a feeling of affiliation with them, and offset the parts of them that are most painful to an AI system. So the relationships we get with real humans grow. They say maybe the desire to have these real relationships drops. But the issue is that, as Liz explains, the ideal in society right now, when we look at Uday and Martha and we say, what a great couple, these are two people. We always want to reach that ideal. And AI will always be a fallback to what your parents, your society, and the movies around you have told you is the best thing to achieve. So the desire to strive for it will always exist. AI just makes it easier. Bottom half.
Yeah, even if all of this is true, I think AI is the biggest blight upon our world. It destroys our planet, it destroys our brain.
That's
you can see that you use it more.
You can explain why you think that's true in the extension. The next thing I want to explain as a point of weighing is why AI will usually treat us well and not treat us badly. Why is this true? AI does not know how we will react to it. It is faced with an unknown and an unknown probability that at some point we opt out of using it. At some point we break our suspension of disbelief. At some point we realize we're talking to an algorithm and not a real person. Why is this really important? It means that once wants to give you copium, to keep you hooked, as OGs say. But notice that the second it stops giving you copium, the second it changes your boyfriend alterations, as PM says, this is when you suddenly realize you're talking to a machine. You're not talking to a human who has empathy or cares for you enough. So in order to not break the suspension of this belief where you're talking to a real human, the AI never wants to hurt you in ways that a human would not, and never wants to make you feel that there's subpar to what you could get in the outside world. So even if it is ruled by the rich elites want you to keep using the AI that seems like the best person around you. The final thing I want to mention is what they say in terms of alternate functions of AI. Let me flip this. The issue is, this is clearly completely inexclusive. LLMs use the same data that they get from our use in order to generate psychological needs. It's a completely different division to R&D that's based on AI's computation ability and stuff like that. That wasn't a flip, but yeah. For all those reasons,
Thank you very much for that very nice speech. And now we're moving to the closing half of this debate. And from the left corner, we have Member of Government!
Firstly, just like less than 30 seconds of words. I had much longer thank yous, but apparently I need to be under 30 seconds, so I'm just going to say one thank you. And this is to the original Sofia who walked the path for us and are the only reason as to why we are here. All of us, like literally in Bulgaria. And I think Roman and Nikki deserve so much praise all around the debate society for everything they've done that they do not get. I also started something at the Euros finals with the full intention of finishing it here in the world stage. Този враг висок е, тя ще ни съзре, ако би бегали, да мрем по-добре. Why do we destroy the desert so that we can ask ChatGPT about the weather when we can just look outside? Why do we pollute the waters so that I can ask character AI a question I could my friends? Why do we destroy the human brain so I can skip the effort of writing a college essay as opposed to learning something new about the world, something new about myself? Closing government extension here is incredibly simple and incredibly easily debate winning. This massively increases the use of AI that either way could be done by a person or is completely pointless for little to no benefit but massive harm. Harm upon our planet, harm upon our brain. Firstly, why does this massively increase the use of AI that we oppose? Firstly, all throughout history and how we are structured as humans to functions is conversationally. It is person to persons. That's how we process information, how we relate to each other, how we assign value and credit. But now when AI can replicate this conversational ability, it is very intuitive for us to turn to it as a force. And this has a replicational effect. The more we use AI, the more it improves within its conversational ability, the more appealing it seems to us to use. But know that AI in general becomes easier to use now when it has those human characteristics. It is friendlier, so it predisposes you to use it. It is more helpful, or sounds like it is, because it factors persuasion, or it becomes just a path of least resistance when we want to use it. So as opposed to Googling, people now ask ChatGPT. As opposed to reading your book, you ask ChatGPT for its opinion. As opposed to talking to your friend, you talk to character AI. Second reason as to why we use it more, because this is the most that AI other LLMs do optimize for persuasion, but not results. What do AI companies do disproportionately? Firstly, they want to optimize for this because it is the easiest to monetize. The problem with LLMs such as ChatGPT and why ChatGPT has not been making a lot of money is because a lot of people use it, but we cannot find a way to monetize it. That is why ChatGPT is developing within persuasion, because then people get hooked. They create relationships within the characters that they talk to, and they want to pay them money. But also, secondly, the market is obviously big. It is a very big part of people's lives to be able to lead conversations with others. But it is also the most vulnerable people with the biggest struggles that you're likely to just monetize upon, because they themselves cannot find friends in real life or think that they couldn't. But also, thirdly, LLMs are a bit shit for everything else. Like, I don't understand what this is debate about on top half about LLMs and them solving everything within the world. They operate with imperfect data, or the likely response that a human is going to give to you, not necessarily the correct one. So that the only thing that hides their inability to actually be functional is their persuasive ability. And this is why AI companies invest with this. This means that the use of AI becomes disproportionately more because they optimize for this. This becomes much better. People use it much more. Their normal life much more. This completely destroys the environment. And now I understand what everybody is going to say. Oh, but we are symmetrically going to adopt AI. 3 reasons as to why this is asymmetrically much greater. Firstly, why people use it just excessively more, because it conversationally, this is already what I have proven within the reasons before. But also, secondly, this will only keep growing in the future because of it convinces you further the more you use it of its use. It is a path dependency. The more you want to use it, the more companies integrate it into everything. Google search now has AI. Alexa has AI. Cars have AI. Entities that might not need AI for their operations, that might not actually improve their services with it. But now, as a society, we have a set of expectations that AI needs to be everywhere because we expect it to be everywhere. But also, thirdly, and importantly, and this is like beautiful analysis, this is now half of the AI fucking prompt that is giving back to you. Complimenting you, saying you hi, sending you emojis. This becomes half of the response of the questions that you have asked it. This is 50% more computing power. This is 50% more energy usage. This is a debate-winning fucking impact. Why is this devastating for the environment? AI is the single most energy-intensive industry on the planet. Why? Because of training data. Either it's neural networks or machine learning. It needs so much pictures of portocals, of oranges, in order to understand what an orange is. Like 1,700 fucking pictures. This training data requires a lot of also computing power. And note that secondly, there is an n-squared problem. The more complex AI gets, the more information gets fed within the AI, the more energy use its expansion. And note that it's disproportionate because for every piece of data, it needs to connect with every other piece of data. So the line goes exponentially in the future in terms of power use. And note that data centers that we're now building all across the world are sucking up all of the water to cool the generators, are dumping toxic waste materials all across India. And what I have proven is a symmetry in use that's massive. Sorry, I'm very sorry. Now, what I have proven is mass asymmetry in the use. This is mass asymmetry in pollution, mass asymmetry, especially in the future when we are integrating this more and more in the type of climate impact that it has. How many more typhoons does Vietnam need to suffer? How many more floodings does Indonesia have to suffer for us to snap ourselves out of this misery where AI is completely needless? Secondly, this completely destroyed the human mind, because we use it as opposed to thinking. It is seductive. The conversation is just really easy, and it is giving you all of those responses that make you want to continue more. It convinces you, but also has an incentive to keep you in that platform. unicorn. This is the structural reason as to why I keep going to it, because it is incredibly reinforcing even in your bad habits. And it is not about the relationship, but about everything else. Whether you're going to now write your essay, whether you're going to drink your water with vitamins or not, and you need to ask ChatGPT for it. But know that every single time that we give up our ability to think, our neural connections weaken, our capacity to train our brain, this muscle that we have over and over again, so that we have the capacity in the future make good decisions for ourselves, weaken. For all of those reasons, CG.
Thank you very much for that speech. Now, to open up the closing opposition part of this debate, I'd like to give a warm welcome to member of the opposition!
A few very brief thank yous. Thank you to everyone who has made this world such a fantastic experience. It's been my first and extremely enjoyable. Everyone involved in organisation, everyone else here. Thank you to everyone at Cambridge Debating for your support over the last 2 years. A huge thank you to my Scottish family, debating and otherwise, who've kept loyal to me despite my defection down south. Thank you to Max. It's been an honour to break the quarterfinal curse for you. And thank you very much to my friends and family back home. Everything I do for you and because of you. Thank you. AI chatbots are just the tip of the iceberg. They're what we integrate with on a day-to-day basis, but they're not where AI will have the most impact in our lives. Where it will have the most impact is within the halls of power, the types of policy that governments use it to create, where it influences our economic modelling. This debate is largely symmetric on output for reasons I'll explain in a second. The difference is the input that we give it, how we train AI to care and understand human ethics and emotion, that we solve the realignment problem with AI. A few responses first to opening government on the question of persuasion. Jack says this is the most persuasive tool that we have ever had, that states use it for propaganda. Uday, clearly influenced by his time in Bulgaria, says you will trust no one, you will trust not the state, because everyone is equally persuasive. These are obviously tense. We agree with Uday, there is already healthy skepticism around AI that only increases when you're aware of its persuasive capacity. Additionally, the diminishing marginal returns for propaganda, because the tools for propaganda exist on a more democratic basis. So it's not reliant on controlling medium networks, when AI chatbots are much more accessible to other people, to opposition politicians to also fight back. Realistically, people are skeptical, they are limiting, and there are ways to fight back against these tools. What then do we think the meaningful difference in this debate is? The thesis of our extension is that we are currently working out how to integrate AI. The AI, despite what closing government will tell you, will be a massive part of our future regardless. The question is how we direct it at this crossroads, how we train it to understand us versus cruel utility of numbers that opening government would stand over. Why is AI going to be extremely influential in politics, policy, economics on either side of the house? First, I cannot overstate the economic efficiency of AI to people who run companies, that it can replace your labor force for a fraction of the cost, that it can double or triple your speeds. There are no limits to how many people want to adopt this and are seeking to do it. And they'll do it regardless of impacts, because people will lay off poor workers all of the time, and that is because they care about efficiency above all else. Second, AI already has access to the halls of power. They don't need a persuasive tool because Sam Altman is at Trump's dinner table. The point is politicians are already in the pocket of AI because they're so wealthy and influential regardless, so it is becoming embedded in the coming years. Third, it is already embedded in our day-to-day use, in our academic work or companion bots and so on. Even with the existing skepticism, people rely on it because it's easy. Now, Valina tries to say there is an asymmetry here. One, AI is still obscenely useful to you, even if you don't think it is emotional, because it can still write your college essay for you in half an hour or give you the answer to any question that you have. It doesn't need to say, P.S. I love you because it's solving a massive problem for me and reducing my workload. Second, overall, this is a minimal aspect of the environmental impact of AI. The things that guzzle water and energy are the data centers which power any logical or rational AI that's running model after model for governments or whatever. They're not the chatbots that exist on an overall basis. Finally, AI may cause problems, but it also offers the solution. We're clearly not at a point where we have sufficient innovation to tackle things like the climate crisis. Our progress as humans is too slow, but AI can change the game in medicine, in environmental science, and so on. May it cause some difficulties for us? Absolutely, but it holds the solutions in ways no human brain has ever proved that it can. The implication of this analysis is that on either side of the house, AI is a massive part of the future. It influences what governments do, it influences the economics that exist around you, and so on. So the question is how we are going to direct it. What happens then with this process? First, the data that we train AI on changes because we train it on human reactions and emotions as opposed to the raw data and numbers in logical models that opening government chooses to talk about. So the things that we feed it are not just things that it can pick up from the internet, but things about how we feel about things, what our ethical codes are, and so on. Second, the only way to train these kinds of things is through mimicking behavior. The reason for this is that the way humans understand the world, ethically and emotionally, is complex. We cannot write down our value system on a bit of paper because it's situation dependent. It's influenced by complex psychology. The meaning of this is that you can't program down a written value into an AI. The only way is to train it to think like a human with our irrationalities, our emotional complexities, and so on. Thirdly, we reward it when it aligns with us. So we teach it that the way to be successful is to be more human. We agree with opening government that humans are wonderful and flawed, but the point is that they have ethics and morals. They care about loyalty, they care about liberty, they care about what it means to reduce suffering, not just on reducing a number of deaths, but what it means to live a dignified life. And we train AI that the best way to offer us efficient outcomes is to align with those kinds of ways of thinking rather than just utilitarian metrics that it decides on alone. Opening.
There isn't a tension, there's short and long-term arguments. In the former, people are manipulated and propagandized and defrauded, and thus AI grows misaligned. And over time, people lose faith in AI and thus trust in anyone or anything that could be it.
I always find it funny when people try to clear up a tension in a POI, because you know you hit on it, right? So if their idea is that there's propaganda in the short term, maybe over a month, I think unrealistic because AI skepticism is already here. It doesn't need to emerge. People are already worried about what it might do, have a healthy skepticism, and so on. Secondly, it isn't clear why a month of worse propaganda would be massively damaging. A bit too late to sort it out, sorry. What government might say to this is, well, the people that you train it on aren't necessarily average people. We can train it on evil value systems and so on. The problem is that AI is learning all of the time. So as soon as it exists and rolls out on a global basis, or if it's collecting data on behalf of a government across your population, it is amalgamating an approximation of a vast range of people who might not have one unified value system, but all care about things like the people close to them or guaranteeing that they have some liberty and so on. Fourthly, we make the outcomes, and this is crucial, more legible to people because AI can explain it to us in a way that we understand. Spitting out a series of ones and zeros or spitting out a complex graph is often difficult for policymakers to interpret on how it might impact your life. When it is able to explain to you, I think people will like this because while it may trade off with some of their economic interests in the short term, it's likely to protect society in the long term and cohesion and so on. This means we are better at discerning what policies are beneficial to implement. Why is this the winning extension in the round? Ultimately, AI is massively impactful under either side of the house. The question is how we align it with our true interests. The only way to do this is to make it understand humanity, and the only way to understand a human is to have empathy by thinking like one. If you want AI to work for you, make it like you. Closing opposition.
Well, thank you very much for that speech. Now, to conclude the government side of this debate, I'd like to have a warm welcome to the government whip!
Okay.
Dankeschön. Let's get. I want to thank everyone who supported us, Maria and Bisser, who are, in my opinion, better than many of the teams here. Not because the teams are bad, because Maria and Bisser are so great. I want to thank a variety of other people, my family who is here, congrats. And given my final this will be my final speech competitively as Sofia A. The immortal words of Dr. Dre go on my mind. There will be nothing after that. So give me one more platinum plaque, then fuck rap, you can have it back. Thank you very much. I am a progressive liberal person who will be a good progressive liberal parent. If I see my child using AI, I'll beat his fucking ass. There is no greater harm on this world, no greater evil than this useless thing that does nothing. Never been prouder to propose. Firstly, what are the responses to closing opposition? Because closing opposition says, but this will still be useful because it writes your essay in this particular capacity. There are three responses to this. Firstly, the reason that the bot that writes your essay exists is because in the first place they developed towards doing it in a way that's like, that is able to persuade people. Why? Because the market for that is vastly bigger. The market for people wanting to interact with others is vastly bigger. But also secondly, because it's much easier to imitate human conversation than it is to imitate math or a complex essay or something like this. Because this is the more intuitive thing, because conversation is less precise, there's more room for improvement. So that's the very first things that ever get developed. And then they use the data from that to train things like essay creation, to train things like math creation. This is the beginning. If we don't have this, all other forms of AI are comparatively slowed down. But also secondly, maybe those kinds of very useful things will be done, but broad adoption will be much lower. Because note, this is a complex new product. It is a product with risks. Does it actually give you what you need it to give you? Does it create this? The biggest way it sells you is it persuades you to keep using it. It persuades you to do this, and note, it does it for useless shit, for things like, oh, what's the weather outside? Great question. It's incredibly important that you ask this. Things like this where people are persuaded into using it for a variety of other things. And notice, like on a likelihood basis, this is what the persuasion skill is most likely to be used on, because this is what the companies want the most, for you to keep using it, so they keep using it towards you using it for this kind of thing. But also thirdly, right, like know that now the AI has vastly more data because it is used for 10,000 other use cases. Velina tells you the most common use case of society is persuasion and conversation. It's how our lizard brains determine whether there's danger or not by interacting with people. So this is the most where they can get data in order to do these kind of more complex things. Maybe, unfortunately, we don't remove AI, though I would love to, but at the very least, we massively slow it down in this particular capacity. I want to first flag what are the impacts of this. We get unambiguously good things on the environment, unambiguously good things on people learning as opposed to using it for their essay. But know that we empower many of opening governments' impacts with a much better mechanism. Because what's their economic impact? You displace people whose jobs rely on persuasion, but they themselves say, alternatively, we focus on other things. So alternatively, you displace more people focusing on math, focusing on something like this. We tell you, all AI becomes more used now. All AI in all circumstances becomes more used, so you displace broadly people more. Whether they do persuasion or not, the bot becomes better, more ubiquitous, more complex. Also secondly, their impact on Dodge's regulation is the AI will convince the lawmaker to let it off the hook. This is their actual opening government mechanism. Like, why would people believe this? They have natural skepticism. Our mechanism is, it's just slower. It can't convince people the same way to adopt it. It isn't funded to the same level that it would be otherwise. So we're able to empower these impacts massively. The one impact that opening government, I think, focuses a lot on is the misinformation argument. I have 4 weighings against the misinformation argument. The first is, as pointed out by closing opposition, people have a natural skepticism towards things they see on the internet, towards things they see coming from other people, at the point where you don't actually interact with this person. What do we tell you? There are things people want to be convinced of, that they wouldn't be skeptical of, because they want to think that the question they asked was such a great question. You're such a good guy in this kind of sense. So that's when the skepticism doesn't kick in, because it validates your own personal feelings, which is something you desire, rather than convincing you of something that you aren't likely to believe at the point where you don't buy external information coming from someone. Secondly though, manipulation can be good or bad. There are many dumb people across the world. Many of them will be convinced towards good things. At the point where AI doesn't necessarily need to be used by bad actors, it can be used by good actors. In many cases, it's good to believe in your government, to have comparatively less skepticism in this particular capacity. But also thirdly, like, okay, people will now buy like pro-Russia things more in this particular capacity. So what? What would they do about it? People have a limited effect upon their lives in this particular case. But we tell you, people have a massive effect on the environment at the point where they constantly use a tool which burns it. Also a massive effect on their own lives when they don't learn because they just keep using this system as a substitute in this particular capacity. Also fourth way, like, okay, people can be manipulated and bad things can happen. But this can be reversed because you see in the real world that Russia isn't good, that there are bad effects of things occurring. You do something bad for yourself and it doesn't feel nice, so you stop doing it. But Pano, how will you reverse the massive amounts of energy used towards destroying your environment? How will you reverse the massive amounts of water used towards this particular thing? This is an argument which once done has no ability to be undone. Yes?
Convincing may be harder, but as your OG says, it is still doable through deepfakes. Your burden is to explain why it's better that data centers generate those than generating emotionally appealing prompts.
Because emotionally appealing prompts are longer, because not everyone requests a photograph, but most people use AI for text, so emotional convincing on a text level is the vastly more popular one. It's used comparatively more. There's more of this kind of terrible environmental effect on this. Then on loneliness, I just want to say this is a highly ambiguous argument at a point where maybe it's good for some people, maybe it's really terrible for some people. If they can't find friends, it seems like it would be a good thing, but also most people know they're talking to a robot, so the impact of this argument is lower on either side, because they won't believe that this person is actually their girlfriend, but they will believe that it can be used to ask them about the weather, stuff like this. Finally, we should be feeding AI human data because it can be great like this. Firstly, we can do this without training it to persuade people. We can just teach it. How do we react to certain things? What makes us happy? What doesn't? How do we interview people? We can study the output without necessarily using it to this kind of thing. But also, secondly, the data is really terrible because there's a selection effect. Who uses AI disproportionately? Lazy people, like lonely people, weirdos in this kind of sense. So it's unrepresentative. Also thirdly, why is AI good? Why can it create something new? It just analyzes existing data. It just takes what we've already done. Just because it can manipulate 70 million photos of oranges to output an orange doesn't mean it can do what I can. Vote us!
I'd like to thank that speaker for that great speech. And now, to conclude this debate as a whole and this championship, I'd like to give a warm welcome to the opposition whip!
Just a few things. First, thank you to Sophie. As you all know, this is one of many tries. It's the one that worked. Thank you. Thank you to my family, including my grandparents who are watching from home. Thank you to the McGill Debating Union and the entire Canadian circuit. I miss you. And as you can all see from the semifinals, McGill is so back. Thank you to Cambridge Debating and to the Iona circuit who have welcomed me. And finally, thank you to every previous debating partner, to Deba, to Naomi, to Rena, and all of WSDC Team Canada. It's been a privilege to work with you and build the skills that brought me here. closing government has two massively exaggerated impacts. The first is that the use of AI uses much more water and energy. I have three responses. Number one, the single biggest build out of green and clean energy in the world right now is coming from AI data centers. We're seeing nuclear power being put back on. We're seeing hydropower being built. We're seeing solar panels being built next to AI data centers. Why? Because the marginal cost of green energy is lower than fossil fuels. It makes sense to privately build these things off grid and put them next to data centers. Second response, in terms of water, there's obviously an incentive to upcycle water, and we're already seeing, for example, many states which have lots of water use from AI tell them no more water, find your own, import it, etc. Third, the water doesn't disappear, it needs to be filtered. They tax the AI companies to refilter the water. Last response, their claim only matters if they create more emissions from fossil fuels, then those emissions have a more than tiny impact on the overall progression of climate change. The terminalization of the impact from closing government on marginally more emissions needs to prove it was fossil fuels, not clean energy. And second, that it's remotely significant. If they prove 0.001 more global warming, I'm not sure what to do with that impact, and they never gave us. There's some littering from electricity. Obviously, you have laws that prevent these companies to pick up their lithium and so on and so forth. Their second claim is that it supplants critical thinking. One, we have responses. For example, lots of universities go back to closed book exams. Number two, obviously you use it in an additive way to learn more facts as you write your essay. Third, there are increased development of watermarking technology that uses lots of data to show where and when AI text has been generated. The point was, lots of CG was bluster. It said AI is bad, destroys your critical thinking, they waved their arms around, they did not prove it structurally. On the rest of the debate, why are we going to win? The biggest reason why we win is look at the motion, mimicking, imitating human behavior. To think like a human, to understand a human and persuade a human, you need to learn on real data, not biased data. What do AI researchers doing AI alignment like David Africa do? They train AI on a cross-section of data across all of society. If you're a government using AI to affect policy, if you're a company using AI in your supply chain, if you're a scientist using AI to affect proteins, or a social scientist looking at AI to measure economic outcomes, you are incentivized economically, socially, politically to make sure that your data is accurate. The key way that AI learns is through feedback. You tell it, here are my values, here are my responses. The response from government is no, but it tricks you. It doesn't get real impact or doesn't actually tell you, real things. So you're tricked in the short term. Two responses. One, if an AI just makes two completely different arguments to you as opening government says, within hours, you stop trusting it. So the incentive is to be consistent. Second, AI learns over time that people have values like integrity, like honesty, like individualism, like liberalism. These values need to be interpreted into binary code. AI has to understand what our values are, what our fears are, what our motivations are. And AI, given all the economic imperatives that we described, is going to play a major role in society either way because it already is. Now, I think the mistake that Top Half does is that they think of AI as ChatGPT. ChatGPT is the tip of the iceberg on AI. The vast majority of machine learning is being used in supply chains, by researchers, by scientists, in vehicles. There are so many other uses of AI that interface with people, that research people, understand people, which are not chatbots and which are used additively alongside people rather than directly interfacing. Closing government tries to refute this empirical fact with very strange structural analysis. They say the market for AI chatbots is very large. You do not become a dominant company like ChatGPT by charging people $20 a month. This is a very simple market. What you do is you license this software, not the chatbot, but the deep learning, the reinforcement learning, the machine learning, out to companies, out to researchers, out to all of society, and then they use that technology. Much of AI will not be consumer facing, it will be employment, and it will be agentic, right? Think about AI agents, things that shop for you, things that do tasks for you, things that can actually replace human labor. Those things all need to understand us because they interact with us every day, because they affect governments and policymakers, because they're obviously going to be used because of how powerful they are. Before I go on opening.
Motivated by the incentives you described, companies will use AI to understand people on our side too, but because it won't be aimed at manipulating us, it won't focus on our weaknesses and our fallibilities and our insecurities. So AI on your side understands the most base version of us. Why would it care about us?
Because we should satisfy the preferences of the most base versions of us. Most of advertising is an attempt to get at these things that's flawed and imperfect. It sells us products which are marginally good for us, but not perfect for us. There are many attempts to advertise to people, to persuade people that are imperfect and flawed and give us things which respond less to our values and preferences. Last of all, the AI has to be so godlike in your imagination to believe opening government. To think the US government will just leave the president's phone lying around for some malicious foreign actor to put a big red button on it that's going to cause them to drop a nuclear weapon instead of, having antivirus software or so on. To think that it's possible to manipulate people into obvious lies without the AIs on the other side because of how cheap and democratized AI is, pushing back on those assertions. It's not clear why it empowers governments. Governments are always empowered. AI is democratic. People have access to it. They use it to push back. So to the extent that there is propaganda, it's propaganda from both sides and has a minimal impact. How do you weigh us into the round? The key thing that opening opposition struggle with is that they focused on some marginal impacts of better outputs. So for example, you could have AI friends, etc., to which opening government successfully says, well, these are a simulacrum, they're not always going to be good, and if OO agrees with our mitigation, as they do in a POI, then you're often not going to value this AI friend very much because you know it's AI. Does it actually resolve loneliness? Maybe it gives you a little bit of happiness in the short term, probably not in the long run. The second is this unspecified claim of economic benefits because of some supply chain optimization, which they never cared to impact or significantly weigh in this debate. What's far more certain is that to teach AI to understand us, AI has to know us like the back of its hand. It has to know our values, our preferences, and our fears. Now, the two important pieces of weighing on this. Number one, even if you initially collect this data for chatbots to use on a consumer level, that data is then resold and cross-pollinated across the entire AI industry. So when you're training to build controls on AI, so your AI alignment research is trying to help companies build models that have stop buttons that say, no, this is unethical, no, don't let this person do this, don't let them put that output in, they're better at mimicking and understanding people. Because AI ultimately thinks through repetition. What it's maximizing for on our side of the house is understanding people and their values, and therefore it iterates and iterates and iterates closer to what we actually believe. Yes, this may be used by some bad actors, but the point is that the general average view of people is about respecting dignity, about respecting rights, about respecting honesty. These are things which are socially glorified and exist in society, which AIs learn from with the unique access to data because you're economically motivated to train on this data. CG says you can still give it this data. There's no economic motivation to do so because there's no reward. B, it's obvious that mimicry is a level way above the ability to write your essay. At the end of the day, consider this. No teams in this debate are going to be able to prove massive pie-in-the-sky claims like the massive use of water or way more use of AI. AI is here to stay. It's in our societies, it's in our governments, it's in our corporations, and it's in our phones. Do you want it to relate to you, to understand it? Do you want to understand that output and have it explain what it's doing to you? Do you want to be able to do research to stop it from doing evil things? Only on our side of the house are you able to achieve this. Very proud to oppose for the last time.
I'd like to thank that speaker for that speech. Did you enjoy the finals? Massive thank you to all the finalists, and let's give them one big round of applause at the end. Yeah? Thank you. I'll give it to somebody from Orcom to explain what's going on now, I guess.
Everyone, moment of your focus, please. What we will do now is take your things and leave the venue. You'll be back here at 7:30 sharp, and we'll start the closing ceremony there. So